Viewers, you're watching this debate at a time when India and China's military is engaged in a delicate engagement in Ladakh over Chinese intrusions in key strategic areas. The outcome of the dialogue could have a bearing on how quickly the standoff is resolved. You have seen some visuals here on Times Now of that standoff, of how Indian and Chinese troops are showing great restraint, especially the Indian force, which matches China's head-to-head, eye-to-eye, and of course, viewers, in spirit. The point is that the Chinese, at least as of now, haven't taken the hint. They haven't pulled back. But this is the here and now. This is the momentary. We might even have a resolution like we had in Doklam. But that won't be the end of Chinese provocation. Our debate today will focus on how India can contain the threat from an assertive China in the medium term. Let's open this out, viewers. We are joined by a distinguished group of panelists. And I want to first begin by posing this question to Kamal Sibal, who's of course been Foreign Secretary. Mr. Sibal, India is trying to engage some of the other world's powers. We've seen a hectic round of diplomacy between Prime Minister Modi and the heads of state of America, Russia, Japan, Australia, and of course, we're also being told France. Now, the obvious goal here is to try and bring some pressure to bear, some goodwill that might be there in a residual fashion with the Chinese, so that the Chinese withdraw. The Chinese, if you go by articles that are appearing in the Global Times, seem to be very upset by these moves that Prime Minister Modi is making, saying that this is adventurism and this will only lead to antagonizing China. How does India deal with this increasingly irresistible neighbor?
Well, actually it's a bit comical that China should think that we are provoking, that India is provoking China. It's just the contrary. You can see that every now and then they are standoff, and India is in a difficult situation where we have to stand up to them and attention, and the potential of a conflict has to be averted. Now, with regard to our conversations with the world leaders, one of course, is that China is very good at psychological warfare. It has many journalists, many media outlets, many commentators, which for one reason or another have linked to them, including academics, because they are dependent on China for easy access for their professional needs. And of course, a lot of money is handed out. And number two, government has not come out very clearly in detail about the facts on the ground. So therefore, a lot of countries which don't have sufficient satellite capabilities or ability independently to assess the situation on the ground would like to know what is happening. So we are confronted with a difficult situation where, on the one hand, we don't want to internationalize the issue, because if we do that, it will become more complicated. On the other hand, we have to, if others show interest, explain to them what the situation is, because if tomorrow it becomes more serious and there is a possibility of a clash, then we should have understanding from other countries about our position. Number three, the fact that Prime Minister has had conversations with President Trump or with the French president or with the Australian Prime Minister is neither here nor there. It is not because of what's happening on the border. This is one of the issues that may have come up. Although I'm told that with Australia, this issue did not come up at all. But since President Trump had taken the initiative to offer arbitration and mediation, it was only right that this issue should have been discussed with President Trump. And it's good to inform the Russians because of the close strategic ties that have been built up between Russia and China, that they have a better understanding of our position, though, of course, I can imagine that publicly they will not take sides. But it is helpful if they're willing to listen to us and absorb our position. We owe nothing to China. China has provoked us very consciously, very deliberately, and we have to stand up and challenge them, and we have to restore the position that existed before this challenge came up. And one last point, that it is now high time that we clearly accepted on the ground what the line of actual control is. Because the situation as exists present gives a great advantage to China because they can keep shifting the line of actual control. Because there is nothing like manning the line of control permanently. So they can always move in and out and say, well, we were always there. And since they're stronger on the ground, and they have better infrastructure on their side, they can do this. Now, I think this is the time when we have to insist that if they have a 1962 line, please define on the ground what that 1962 line is. You can't keep it vague. And there should be a very thin no man's land between what we think is our line of control and what they think is a line of control. Very thin line, which should be a no man's land. It should not be an open house where they can move in any time they want, anywhere, at salient points to put pressure on us. I think enough is enough now, and we have to stand firm and demand clarity on the line of actual control.
Okay, let me bring in Mr. Singh, K.C. Singh, former Secretary of the MEA. Mr. K.C. Singh, there are differing views coming out on how far the Chinese have intruded. Some people are saying that we have been able to push back their initial provocation. Others are saying that they have occupied land, territory between Finger 5 and Finger 8 along the north bank of the Pangong Tso, 3 to 4 kilometers of our territory along the Galwan River. There are differing points of views coming out on this. Kamal Sibal says, let's first define the LAC. But if there are intrusions such as this, and we have decided that we are going to enforce the status quo ante, is it even possible?
I think let's not mix the immediately tactical with the medium term to the long term.
Okay.
Now, defining of LAC is an old one. The special representatives of the two countries have been wrestling with this problem. And the Chinese have not even agreed to exchange maps. So how do you define that? That comes much later. I think the immediate issue to see is what has provoked the Chinese, what is their strategy, what exactly are they planning? Is it because of changes we made last October, constitutional changes in J&K and Ladakh? Because if you remember at that point, the Chinese had said it impinges on our national security. Is it because there were some statements made in the Indian Parliament by our ministers to the extent that we will take back Aksai Chin, we'll take back Pakistan-occupied Kashmir? Is that one factor? Because they've got their CPEC going through Pakistani-occupied Kashmir. Is it because of internal pressure on President Xi because of the way the pandemic has been handled? He's also moved into Hong Kong. This is in keeping with old Chinese habit. If you remember 1962, the invasion on India came in the shadow of the Cuban Missile Crisis. When the Soviet Union and the Americans were very busy with the Cuban crisis, that's when the Chinese moved ahead. So at the moment they realized that the Americans are completely distracted by their election, by now racial riots, by on top of that the pandemic, And they realize that none of the other countries in Europe or anywhere else have any time at all, even for the meeting of the UN Security Council. And as Mr. Sibal said, we don't want to internationalize it. Now, the government is in a dilemma because you cannot keep information away from public because there are satellite pictures available, there are former army commanders who can read between the lines. That's why the defense minister came out with that statement that yes, achhi bhari, he called it achhi bhari amount of Chinese soldiers have come on our side. Going by past experience, it takes a while before the Chinese decide, if at all, to go back. But if we start internationalizing and start politicizing it domestically, then it plays also into the Chinese domestic politics. If their intention is not to alter the status quo, I think that is the first thing we have to assess. Are they trying to alter the status quo, or are they simply trying to stop us from improving the infrastructure along the border? Then there is some kind of possibility of a resolution. But if they've decided to press ahead and alter the status quo, then I think India will have to look at other steps, which may come some months from now. But India cannot possibly accept the salami slicing kind of methodology the Chinese use in the South China Sea of take it by bits and parts and then consolidate and alter the status quo. I think that is a call that we'll have to take after the generals have met, the levels have been raised, maybe political exchanges have taken place. At that stage, is China willing to risk a conflict, or China is simply posturing to get concessions from India on freezing the infrastructure development? We'll have to wait and see.
Okay, General Bakshi, before I come out to Sudhindra Kulkarni and Mr. Katju, General Bakshi, I just want to ask you, KC Singh has put it in three different questions. Has India provoked the Chinese? Have Indian MPs' rhetoric provoked China? Or is China expansionist, is going to do what it has to do as a rising hegemon, and India will have to find different ways to deal with it? First, you agree with this. Secondly, do you believe, sir, that the Chinese are there to alter the status quo and India has very limited objectives and will just have to sit back and take it?
Let me start with the second question first. Now, the intrusions, this is an annual affair that takes place in terms of the lack of clarity or the ambiguity in the exact location of the line of control. We go up to our perception, they come up to here. This year there has been a marked difference. There is not one particular point of contestation. It was Doklam, it was Chumar, it was Depsan earlier in the years that have gone. But this time it is on four different points concurrent, number one. Number two, there is a tactical method in the intrusion, especially the intrusion at Galwan. We have been trying to build our axes to the subsector north, and we have the Darbuk, Shiok, DBO road, which is a very vital 255-kilometer artery, which now gives us a north-south axis right through, which we lacked earlier for the last so many years. Now the intrusion that has taken place at Galwan is at the junction or the confluence of the Shiok and Galwan rivers, which is 5 kilometers from the LST, and the Chinese have come in about 3 kilometers. They are on the ridge line, on the heights, overlooking our very vital new artery. Is this a Kargil redux? Is this a Kargil redux?
Right.
Because just by sitting there, you are denying us the use of that road. There is no point having spent so much time and effort in constructing that road if the Chinese will just sit on the heights a la Kargil and deny you movement on that particular axis. So therefore, the situation is materially different, and I would like to point out as a military man that tactically what affects us the most, and we have to clearly define our red lines to the Chinese. We did that in Doklam, and our talks were far more successful in resolving the matter. That the Jampui Ridge is not negotiable. So, having a road threatened like this is not negotiable. Let me put it there as a military man, right and straight. This is the difference. There is the intrusion also in the fingers area north of the Pomam Tso. Both the places, Pomam Tso and the Shok Galwan confluence, they have gotten almost a brigade each. Right? And this brigade has got 2 battalions forward and they've got a unit in depth. As things have heated up, as we match them man for man, they have now started bringing in artillery and mechanized elements in the depth areas. So have we. So have we. So the point at issue is, this is not the normal annual tamasha. This is a tamasha with a difference. Why are the Chinese doing it? We have to delve into that. Let's start at what is called the geostrategic level, or at that what I would like to call the grand strategic level. First, China is giving you a signal that in Cold War 2.0, do not align yourself completely with the Americans. There will be costs and consequences. There's a clear message being given to you. You have to now take your call whether you want to heed this kind of message. That's number one. Number two, the COVID has put a lot of pressure on China. About 1,000 foreign industries want to move out of China and maybe relocate in India, Vietnam, Malaysia, Bangladesh, etc. This is also a subtle message. Don't get too adventurous on that score. So that's at the geostrategic level. At the operational level, or what is called the theater command level, the simple fact is that the message he is giving you by this posturing on your road axis is that he apprehends a threat to the Aksai Chin, National Highway 219, which connects Xinjiang with Tibet. And he is very, he's trying to tell you his sensitivity. He is, as K.C. Singh said, also telling you that your assertion that we will retake POK, we will retake Gilgit-Baltistan, poses a threat to his artery, which is the China-Pakistan economic corridor, another very vital artery as far as the Chinese are concerned. So the point at issue is that China has taken the last 50 years to build up first-class infrastructure in Tibet under the guise of tourism. We did not interfere with that. Belatedly, we are now trying to build up our infrastructure, and China is trying to impose limits on what we are doing in our own sovereign territory. None of these roads is even in the contested area. So the point at issue is that now you can't pussyfoot around this. The time has come to take a call. We would like to resolve it peacefully. There is something which will help the Chinese also, because you see, as per the Chinese strategic culture, they insist on only one strategic direction at a given point in time. Right now, that Chinese direction is towards Taiwan, South China Sea, East China Sea. Do they want to mess around with India in the Western Theater Command and open 2 fronts at the same time?
Right.
There's a third set of reasons. I'll just finish. There's a third set of reasons. Pakistan, when we did Balakot, the airstrike, was cowed down for quite some time. For a year, they did nothing because their so-called nuclear bluff had been called. Even when we abrogated Article 370 in August last year, they did sweet Fanny Adams. China is trying to bluffer up Pakistan as it is trying to bluffer up Nepal. to continue hostile acts against us. Nepal is being instigated, and Pakistan is fully engaged in this asymmetric warfare, from which it has cowed down a bit. They are being given encouragement, and they are encouraged. January this year onward, there are two countries of the world that are acting militarily very aggressive. One is China, the other is Pakistan. 1,300 plus border violations, ceasefire violations, infiltration on the rise, terrorist incidents on the rise in Handwara, Pulwama. And he just tried to do a Pulwama redux.
Yes.
So you have now to take a call that whatever military pressure you had applied and which had paid off dividends to a certain extent is now no longer working, because the Chinese are trying to create a climate in which you either face up or you back down. I don't think we can afford to back down.
Okay.
We hope these talks will work. If they don't, you have just two options. Attack the Galwan intrusion and the other intrusion physically, throw them, evict them from that area in a Kargil redux, 2-division-sized operations or more, and you will have to use air power and artillery.
Okay.
And it has all the risks of major escalation, especially if there is a loss of face to any side. Then the escalation spiral will go up, and it could also, pose dangers of the extreme kind. Do we want it? Question number 2, does China want it at this time? So the fact is that is the second option. There is a third option, that you counter ingress in areas which are Kali and, consolidate pieces of real estate for trade-off. These are your options. This is your option.
Okay, but nowhere do you believe that we should pull back in any which way and concede the advantage to mollify the Chinese, give them a face saver. Okay, this is interesting, because if I've loosely understood what General Bakshi has said is the following, that finally, under the Modi government, India is asserting its territorial claims in this area, and China is reacting because it sees a threat, whether it is taking back POK or it's taking back positions that it thought at one particular point in time were long sort of given up upon. India is asserting itself, it's building its infrastructure, it wants to make sure that its territories are safeguarded, and what's wrong with that? And we need to take it as best as we can and even escalate this into a military face-off if it requires to push back China. But Sudhindra Kulkarni, who's written a piece just yesterday in the Times of India, has a different point of view. Now, Sudhindra Kulkarni, you begin your article by saying, at the predictable risk of being branded as an anti-national by BJP supporters, I'm compelled by the latest eruption of tension between India and China over our unresolved boundary dispute to affirm two inescapable truths. One, without India-Pakistan-China dialogue and cooperation, India cannot resolve the long-standing issue with its two large neighbors. Two, without peaceful and good neighborly relations with China and Pakistan, neither India nor the rest of South Asia can realize their full potential of prosperity, progress, and greatness. And you go on to say that should we even be sort of standing our ground on Aksai Chin and the claim that we have made that we must take back POK, which you believe we should not. We should not provoke the dragon. What makes you believe that mollifying China, giving up our territorial claims, will not embolden China further, sir?
Rahul ji, first of all, I hope and I believe that the current standoff between India and China at the line of control will be resolved in the short term, in the immediate term, through military to military parleys and diplomatic parleys. We succeeded even in resolving the Doklam crisis through diplomatic parleys, patient, determined, and ultimately we succeeded in ensuring that the situation was not escalated to something more serious. I hope it will happen. However, as you said right in the beginning, if we look at the medium term, what is the way by which we can defend our border, and in the long term, how can we have a permanent solution to this recurring problem? These intrusions into the line of control are happening year after year after year. The reason is there is no clarity at all on what is a line of control. India defines it in one way, China defines it another way on very many stretches, and this is making it possible for frequent intrusions. The question and the challenge that we have to face is, what is the long-term solution to this problem? How can we resolve the boundary dispute with China and also a different kind of a border dispute with Pakistan? The two are interrelated. And if you look at the long term, then any sensible Indian, any patriotic Indian will come to a conclusion that a lasting solution will involve compromises both on China and on Pakistan. There is simply no way, as I have argued in my article in the Times of India, there is simply no way that we can get either POK back or Aksai Chin back. Now go back, Rahul ji, to August 5 last year, when the Modi government abrogated Article 370 of the Constitution and also reorganized the Jammu Kashmir state by making Ladakh a separate union territory. In Parliament, our Home Minister made a statement that when we say Jammu and Kashmir, it means not only POK but also Aksai Chin, and we are going to take both POK and Aksai Chin, even if it means sacrificing our lives. The then Army Chief Bipin Rawat said that our goal is to wrest POK back. The External Affairs Minister Shivshankar said that we visualize a day when we will have a physical jurisdiction over POK, which means that India has defined the long-term goal as taking both POK back as well as Aksai Chin back. Now ask yourself, is it realistic? Here on LOC, the defense minister is saying that it is caused because of perceptional differences on what LAC is. So even if it means a few kilometers here, there, we are unable to fix this problem. Are we ever going to get the whole of Aksai Chin back? Let's be realistic. We should not delude ourselves, and we should not mislead the people of India into thinking that one day we'll get both POK back and Aksai Chin back, because this is in fact weakening India's position. If we get clarity on what a long-term solution is, then it becomes possible to deal with both China and Pakistan in the immediate short-term and medium-term levels. This is my submission. It's high time that we become realistic and not be swayed by ultra-nationalist sentiments, which are long on rhetoric but completely short on the situation on the ground.
Mr. Kaju, don't provoke China with unrealistic, jingoistic, ultra-nationalistic, delusional territorial claims on POK, Aksai Chin. That's one way forward. And then obviously a long-term dialogue. And that will involve making concessions. Mr. Kaju, is that the way forward? Do you agree with Sudhindra Kulkarni?
Look, I do believe that realism should guide all us. But realism does not mean making concession or thinking of concession ab initio. The fact of the matter is that whatever Mr. Sudhindra Kulkarni may argue, neither Pakistan nor China have shown a willingness to arrive at realistic solution of the Jammu and Kashmir issue, and that is a fact. The Chinese have dragged their feet even on defining the line of actual control, leave alone arriving at a settlement of the border. We know this as a fact. Despite our best efforts, the Chinese have failed to even exchange maps with. As far as Pakistan is concerned, they say that Jammu and Kashmir is a jugular vein, and indeed, I feel that if Jammu and Kashmir is taken away from what Pakistan says is in their blood, the glue which holds Pakistan may not hold there any further. So therefore, to hope that both our neighbors will be willing to have a realistic conversation with us, as of now, is in itself unrealistic. The fact of the matter is that the Chinese have taken a very deliberate move. It has obviously been taken at the highest political level. Now, my eminent colleagues on the panel have given a whole host of reasons which may have led the Chinese to take the step, but we are faced with a situation where they have created facts on the ground. And we have to have an objective that the status quo ante is achieved. Now, I hear that a military solution, but let us not forget that there is a material difference between Pakistan and China. And therefore, no political leadership will be willing easily to try to adopt a military way. I do believe that the Chinese too, at this time, having achieved perhaps would not want the military solution. They are making all kinds of comments and statements that look, we can solve this, but all that is very good because they have created the facts on the what is the way for us. I think the first problem that all of us face is that we really don't know what is the situation on the ground. General Bakshi has given us a very, very somber picture, what he believes has happened. But there is no authoritative comment from government. These are sensitive issues, and if, as of now, they can be resolved through conversations between the two militaries and discussions at the diplomatic level, then it will be all very good. But at some stage, I think the government will, at that stage, the government can decide. It will have to take the nation about what has happened.
Okay.
And the nation will have to deal with it for a long, patient talk, indicating very strongly to the Chinese that we are not helped, that we do have cards that we can play. And there are numerous cards. Now, my last point. Mentioned initially, Rahul, that the Prime Minister has been with other leaders. I think when leaders converse, then their discussions do include immediate issues, and certainly for the international community, any tensions on the line of actual control between India and China, where troop levels are being augmented, is a cause of concern. So I think it is a good opportunity for the Prime Minister, wherever he's had to explain our point of view, and I'm confident that he too would have indicated that we have every intention to resolve this diplomatically, and and through talks, but that we will not accept Chinese from creating these facts on the ground and forcing us to accept them. My last point is that I think the Doklam situation, from what I understand, that on the ground, the Doklam situation and what the Chinese have done now in the areas that they is different.
Okay. So, look, I think that much we've all realized, that Doklam is different from what has happened in Ladakh. I want to very quickly go back to KC Singh, Mr. Sibal, and General Bakshi. I think we're going to not have the time beyond that, unfortunately. This is a very engaging conversation. But let me come back to you, Mr. KC Singh. India and China and Pakistan. Now, if you go by what Sudhindra Kulkarni said, General G.D. Bakshi said, obviously have very differing perceptions of what territories should accrue to them and what, of course, concessions they can make on this, if any at all. But I think one point that Mr. Kaju made is an interesting one, that to believe that Pakistan and China will have a realistic approach to pursuing peace is itself unrealistic. Perhaps Mr. Modi, realizing the costs of a military escalation, is engaging pragmatically other powers to build strategic width, give himself wider berth to contain China at some level, because he realizes that military options may not work. Mr. Singh.
No, I think I agree with Jan Bakshi that there is the old adage, if you want peace, you have to be prepared for war. Now, because these intrusions are deeper and more in number than the usual summer pastime of PLA, and there is a clear strategic motive behind them, therefore, there's a rollback which has to be done. Otherwise, the Chinese they're testing you, and they're also sending you a signal. And it's not a coincidence that Prime Minister has spoken to the Australian Prime Minister yesterday and upgraded the relationship to a strategic one, where at the ministerial level, there'll be a 2+2. So it is a quad, the old quad which started in 2007, which is Japan, Australia, India, and US, will continue to get added up, will continue to increase their engagement. Now, that is a diplomatic and strategic signal sent to China, that if you pressurize us, we are not going to step back strategically. We will continue to hold hands. And President Trump, remember, he is talking of recasting the G7 as a combination of democracies, calling it a D10. Now, that is again a signal to China. You'll be left out of that. Russians will be brought in to create a division. So there is much happening at the strategic level. But at the local level, I don't agree with Mr. Kulkarni that we just throw in the towel on Pakistan and China. What if the West had thrown in the towel on Berlin? Just see what happened in future. Nobody knows what happens in 10 years' time. This is assuming that China will have a linear rise. This is assuming that the strategic gap or comprehensive power gap between us and China will keep increasing. This is assuming that a combination of countries cannot contain China, that a decoupling from China commercially, financially, will not weaken China. I think there are many things in play today, post the pandemic, because of which we should not underestimate many of the cards that we may be holding, which may not be visible, but which are pressure points in China. And we'll only know once we show them a certain willingness to go all the way unless they go back. And I think we will know. It took 73 days in case of Doklam. And there is the additional thing which probably General Bakshi can comment. With the onset of winter, are we affected more or are the Chinese affected more? That may also be a factor. So the Chinese may then decide to really, cut their losses and say, okay, let's step back. So we leave the door open for them to retreat. Don't corner them, but tell them that there's absolutely no two ways where a crucial national interests are concerned. This is a new India. We've a couple of times before given them a bloody nose. They know it. PLA is not the great army it is made out to be.
General Bakshi, quick response before I bring in Mr. Sibal.
I totally go along with what KC Singh has said. the fact of the matter, please don't forget, the Chinese army has not seen combat for the last 42 years. The last war that they fought with Vietnam in 79, I think they came out second best, right? So the Chinese are not 10 feet tall that we have to crawl, that we have to get onto the bended knee. Let's be quite clear. The situation today and the situation in 1962 is materially different. Here is an armed forces which has become more theoretical. They are more very good now at posturing. They have a whole lot of non-contact warfare theories. And they may get reality checks in real conflict. See what is up against him. The United States, the Quad, in Japan, in Asia itself, we have Japan, we have Vietnam, we have Indonesia, Malaysia, South Korea, who would all like to align against increasingly irascible and uncontrollable China. Somebody has to put a check. So that alliance architecture is already on place. We have cards to play. There is the Taiwan card. If Pakistan can be supported by China to a level where they nuclear arm Pakistan, the entire armed forces of Pakistan, 80% is on Chinese weaponry and on Chinese instigation. Now they are instigating Nepal. They are trying to build an artificial island in Maldives. They have built one in Sri Lanka. So are you just going to crawl? So you cannot. And you see, the power differential between the two countries is going to reduce.
Right.
And there is the Tibet card. So I don't think things are so bleak as they are made out to be. And let me also tell you, if push comes to shove, your greatest military advantage is not on the land border. It is on the sea border. It's on the sea front. It's in the Indo-Pacific, that especially the Indian Ocean, where you can interdict 70% of his oil. You can interdict his entire trade and bring it to a halt. There are the three choke points of, Lombok and Malacca Straits, etc. The greatest advantage is towards the sea, which geography gives you.
Right.
Conventionally, I don't think we are too badly off. There is no need to start quaking in our boots and sweating and sweltering, as some people are trying to make out here.
Okay.
I don't think so.
Okay.
You can look forward with confidence.
Okay, assert yourselves. Play the long game. So what's the long game? Kamal Sibal, will the bold diplomatic gambit pay off? Is that what we should be investing in more right now? What should we do?
Well, before I answer your question, let me answer your question. I think just a bold diplomatic effort is not going to solve the situation. Look at the manner in which China is dealing with the United States. It has become so abusive, and their wolf warrior diplomacy is evident in other countries. The manner in which they are browbeating Australia, Canada, they are browbeaten Sweden, Norway, South Korea, Japan. So diplomacy is not enough. We have to be strong on the ground. And Chinese have to realize that they can't get their way militarily on the ground. And as I've said elsewhere, a stalemate is actually a defeat for China, because it will mean that they cannot get their way, as they have done in the South China Sea with other countries. They can't get their way with India. But having said that, I must underline a few points which are very important, because we should not weaken our own case. One is that all these border agreements, 1993, 1996, 2005, 2013, they are not working. If you look at the text of the agreements, you will find that China is violating them as they please. The 2005 agreement and 2013 agreement accept the principle of equal and mutual security. Now, what does equal security mean? That we should be able to build up our defenses on our side against the increased security challenges that China poses to us by the development of their excellent military infrastructure in Tibet. So once they've accepted the principle, they can't object to upgradation of the military infrastructure by us. Number three, we have not provoked China, and any argument that is being given that somehow we have provoked China is not true. Look, we have always said that there is a problem of a border on the western side and on the eastern side. And at one time, China wanted to settle on a basis of what is ours in the west. We keep what is yours in the east, we keep, which means they recognize that Xai is negotiable with the concessions they are willing to make in the east. So Xai has always been an issue. So why do you expect the Home Minister of India to say Xai is China's? Of course it's not China's. It is still disputed, and the Chinese recognize it is still disputed, and there has to be a final solution. Then again, we have not provoked China on the pandemic. We have not said anything on WHO. On Xinjiang, we have not done anything. We have not said anything unfavorable to China. And on Hong Kong, we have kept quiet. So there is no immediate provocation we have given. The provocation is coming from the Chinese side. Number four, why do we keep on saying that there are different perceptions of the line of actual control? The Chinese never say that. We keep saying that. And that puts us in a difficult situation because we are conceding that there is a gray area, whereas China says, no, we are on our side and we are defending our sovereign territory. I think we need to change the formulations we use and what we say. Then we have opposed the CPEC. Chinese know that POK and Gilgit-Baltistan is not Pakistani territory. Their own 1963 agreement, 63 or 65 agreement, 63 agreement with Pakistan recognizes that. So if we say that we will recover control of POK, this is a long-standing position, and this cannot be a provocation to China. Then how can China determine our foreign policy towards other countries, especially towards the United States? They have benefited immensely from their relationship with the United States, which even today is much more dense, much more expensive than our relationship with the United States. We have not objected to that. So if we want to develop our relations with China, who's China to tell us what should be the degree of our relations with the United States? And therefore, we should not start feeling defensive about improving our ties with the United States to the extent that we need to do. And finally, in terms of provocations, look at Chinese provocations, seeking to bring the issue of Kashmir back into the UNSC, opposing us on NSG, building up Pakistan, supporting them on terrorism. On the nuclear issues, they have been extremely difficult with us. So there's a whole list of provocations. And if our Home Minister says something about Xi, how can you equate these things? Come on, let's not weaken our own case and start feeling defensive about very relatively mild things that we say to assert a long-standing position with China well known. So I think the thing is, to answer your question finally, we must do our diplomacy, but stand firm on the ground militarily, and a combination of the two is the only way we can find a solution to this problem.
Well, we've had an engaging 1-hour discussion. Unfortunately, we've really run out of time. Sudhindra Kulkarni, I would have really loved to give you the last word on at least some of the comments that are made. If you could just sum up your point of view, because many people are saying that perhaps you're conceding too much and that is being unrealistic. Very quickly, 30 seconds, sir, why you think that this is not right to say?
Just 2 points, Rahulji. You know, our Prime Minister very rightly said something important a few weeks ago, that India must be Atmanirbhar, self-reliant. So we should be self-reliant even in defending ourselves. Let's not think that America or Japan or Australia or some other country is going to come and fight with us if there is a war with China. It's never going to happen. Secondly, if China, let's suppose China goes back to status quo ante and this current standoff is resolved, would that also not mean that we are making a concession because we are then happy at conceding the rest of Aksai Chin to China. So this is what I'm saying, that we have to make concession both to China and to Pakistan, just as they have to make concession. China has to make a concession on the eastern sector as far as Arunachal Pradesh is concerned. Arunachal Pradesh will never go back to China. So it's on the basis of compromise that we can find a lasting solution.
Okay, well, bullies are famous for...
Lastly, Xi Jinping has made a proposal. Xi Jinping has made a proposal for a three-nation dialogue. India, China, Pakistan. Prime Minister Modi should accept this proposal.
Okay, Mr. Kaju, very quickly.
One word.
Very quickly, sir. I'm really run out of time. Yes, Mr. Kaju.
Bilateralism with Pakistan is non-negotiable.
Non-negotiable.
There's no question of a three-way dialogue.
Remember what happens when you go head-to-head with a bully. If you stand up to the bully, you will make the bully take a step back. If you show you're weak, the bully will be all over you. That's the equation right now. China is testing, it's bullying. India needs to stand firm. No questions of concessions. There will be different views on this. We welcome them. But there can be no concessions to bullies. They will keep wanting more and more and more. We leave it at that, viewers. It's been engaging, and I hope it's been rewarding for you to watch. Thank you.